I mean, the value comes from executing, and you know, some like nothing else really matters. So I think you know, like I think it's more like this is just the nature of crypto, of greed, of markets, and so on. But and what's amazing is now it's coming full circle, right? And the market and the industry and the community is like waking up to the fact that okay, this is where the real value is.
Yeah. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Supra, the vertically integrated L1 for super dApps. They have a very cool new product coming out called Supra Containers. So head over to supra.com. That's supra.com/containers. So if you're building on an L1 and it feels a little bit crowded, or the complexity of L2 and L3s are getting you down, just head over to Supra. They'll get you sorted. Thank me later.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bell Curve. Before we jump in, quick disclaimer. The views expressed by my co-host today are their personal views, and they do not represent the views of any organization with which the co-hosts are associated with. Nothing in the episode is construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. You know the deal. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Guys, welcome to an episode of Bell Curve here. We're doing this live. This is actually the first live recording that we've ever done at the Blockworks office here. We got Stani and Rune. Guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pumped that we could make this happen, guys. The in-person is much better than the virtual, I think, for the podcast recordings. So I actually, we're going to be talking about the Sky Aave Force. And I want to end this conversation on kind of a state of the union of DeFi Renaissance, etc. But before we get there, I actually wanted to rewind the clock back a little bit and just get a sense of the history of originally Maker, now Sky, and Aave, and how you both kind of came up together as protocols when you launched around the same time in 2018, 2019 timeframe. So could you guys just take us back in time to what it was like, you know, launching a DeFi protocol back then? And how did kind of Maker and Aave come up together and work together?
I mean, Rune, you have more history and you were much more earlier with Maker, so maybe you can start.
Well, I mean, if you go all the way back to like the really early days of Ethereum, basically, I think the thing that really marks it is that there was just no money in crypto at that point, right? So everybody who worked in crypto were like idealists and sort of like crazy technologists. There was no like business case or like you know, it was all you know, you had to be sort of crazy and sort of have this like sort of crazy vision of like, oh my god, one day in the future.
No one was debating value capture back then. We were just trying to make shit work.
Everyone is an anarchist.
Yeah, it'll be like, yeah, like one day there will be many protocols and they will work, they will fit together, and people will use multiple smart contracts at once. And it was like all very esoteric at the time. Yeah, so I think basically around the time when, I mean, so Maker, right? So it's very idealistic, very ideological, very technology focused, and that also meant that progress was very slow in Maker because there was just so much, like, it was sort of, people also just like, you know, really doing like research into all sorts of stuff. And so I think around the time when Maker launched, it was basically, right, we spent like 2 years basically like researching and preparing to launch. And then there was a time, I mean, basically around the time that DeFi, the broader DeFi and ETHLend and Aave came up, right? And it was actually kind of, the vibe started changing at the time. So that's also what led to Maker actually launching, like actually shipping something and launching DAI, was because like it wasn't even that we were like finished, because it was kind of like it's kept, you can always build more, you can always do more research. It's more like the vibe started changing and it was clear that okay, things are launching now, like now's the time to actually build things and be out there. So I think that, I mean, that change has then just become more and more obvious, I think, over time. And I think it sort of leads all the way up. It's been a kind of a continuation of that leads all the way to things like now, like the rebrand to Sky and like Sky Aave Force. And everything that we're focusing on now is just like crypto growing up from this ideological, crazy technology that you have to be crazy to believe in, to just like, I mean, basically like big business to a much greater degree, right? Where, of course, we want to take along with us as much as possible of the original ideals and values and like the technological edge.
Right.
But also, in the end, all of that is pointless if you're not delivering it to real people. Like if people don't use it and they don't get the benefits, then in the end, it's just like a science project, right? And I guess at this point, I feel like probably both of us, we got sort of addicted to you want to have a real impact. You don't just want to sit in a basement and doing some science.
Yeah.
You want to deliver products to real people.
And a lot of like projects on chain is pretty much like science projects. So like I think this has been also like discussion about like DeFi and Ethereum and whatnot. Like we want to see a lot of things happening on chain and like non-financial use cases and whatnot. But like DeFi is something that actually solidified to have product market fit, and not just that, but like you actually have now like 2 significant DAOs that are actually having this revenue generating protocols, and actually I would say like, I don't know if the right terminology is to say that they're real businesses or like profitable public goods, but like they actually are something that generates revenue and value in the ecosystem. And I think that's a big difference, because when we started, and for me personally, it started as a kind of like creative project, and then like, hey, what if the whole finance could exist on chain and with smart contracts and whatnot, but also like how we can actually make this a useful product, because there's 2 differences between something that is interesting experimentation and an actual product that people will use. And how do you get from like, oh, let's do this on chain, make it interesting, but also like how this becomes like a really good product. And it takes years to build something that solidifies and actually grows as the whole ecosystem grows.
Yeah. I think one of the things that got people excited back then, there was this concept of finance Legos, right? And okay, there's, Aave's kind of building a borrow lend protocol, and Maker is building this, decentralized stablecoin. It's very cool, and they kind of work together, right? And Aave, I've always seen as kind of this, if you're launching a new token, it's a great launch pad. A lot of people like to loop things on Aave. It's a big source of demand for the token. It's been a source of demand for DAI over the years as well. And there have been some really great examples of collaboration in between Aave and Maker over the years. I think the D3M module is a really good example of that, where when, sort of borrowing variable interest rates on Maker or on Aave rather would spike out of control, that could actually be controlled by a vault from Maker, right? So there have been these really nice instances of helping. And I think that was a vision that excited a ton of people, including me. And so it's awesome to see you guys continuing that vision and working together now. And maybe that kind of takes us up through the present time. And before we get into the Sky Aave Force and how you guys are working together, I think people, I'm sure they've heard about it at this point, but Rune, I wanted to just give you a little bit of a soapbox here to talk a little bit about the transition again from Maker to Sky. What are all the, what was the motivation there? And then what are all the different component parts of that? And then that'll lead into teeing us up to talk about this alliance between the 2 of you.
Yeah, so the underlying shift is sort of, I guess, sort of implementing the consequences of the kind of the change I talked about, of like how everything in crypto, everything in Ethereum and DeFi started off extremely ideological and technology focused. And now what's happening is sort of user and product focused. And then I think it's just, actually, I really look at Aave, and back sort of a couple of years back, I remember thinking like Aave somehow got this figured out really early on. So Aave was like maybe the first DeFi project that felt like a product, it was like designed as a product. Maker is so old. It's the oldest DeFi project, right? It's so old that it's like older than Ethereum, right? It was like built before Ethereum even launched, right? So it's just so deep in that like extreme end of ideology and technology, right? So the fact that Maker fundamentally was technology was so ingrained in like everything it was, and things like the branding of MKR and DAI being like 2 completely separate brands that sort of are not really like they kind of emerged organically separately over like a period of like with years between them, and so basically the big shift to Sky represents this like going back to basics and being like, what if you were to design this as a product fundamentally, right? So the goal is to get users to use it, and it's not enough to just build a cool technology. You got to actually figure out how do you deliver that sort of as impact, as value to users. And so fundamentally what Sky aims to be is like the best and easiest place to get rewarded for saving, right? So it sort of focuses on that, the stablecoin use case, but then specifically also the fact that with a decentralized stablecoin, you can deliver decentralized savings and rewards, right? Kind of built into the protocol, accessible with a stablecoin. And then so that's just one thing of like Sky, the brand sort of represents. It's approachable and accessible, and it's it's just like all those like good vibes. A little bit kind of.
It's nice. It's
raw.
like a night sky and stars. Like, who doesn't like that? That's great.
Yeah, and I mean, and then also what's cool is that it's one of the few cases where the token symbol itself, right, Sky, you can actually like, convey brand values just with the token symbol. I've always been obsessed about like the ticker names themselves.
They matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and because
They matter a lot.
Yeah.
Especially-
Especially ETF guys talk about it. It's a huge deal, actually.
yeah, and I think it's a bigger deal in DeFi than anything else because everything's so interconnected and it's like integrated everywhere, right? And when you do an integration, like the only way you can deliver on UX when you're integrated into something else is like USDS or something, right? Like it has USD in the name, so you can tell from the name that it's a stablecoin, right?
Yep.
And then like Sky is like uniquely one of the few names where like it's a ticker length name, and you can actually deliver some of that brand value, which I think is pretty cool.
Did that factor into the naming of Sky at all? Can you tell us?
I mean, yeah, like that and a whole bunch of other. I mean, also the fact that you can connect it to the stars, which is sort of trying to simplify the. I mean, actually, that's the kind of the other major piece of Sky, right? So one thing is just like easy to use, focus on the savings use case, and kind of abstract away the other parts of the technology. And then there's this thing of like try to deliver kind of like the differentiated killer use case of a decentralized stablecoin and DeFi in general, and like what's something you can do with DeFi that you can't do with like traditional banking or just like other alternative means of savings, right? And that is token rewards,
right?
So that's what the stars are basically. They're like these like independent projects incubated out of Sky, and then you can get them as token rewards. And then the first one is that's kind of back to the history of Maker and Aave, right? The first one is Spark.
Right.
That's coming, right? Which is actually a fork of Aave that then like paved the way actually for the collaboration between Sky and Aave, like the kind of the level of collaboration that we envision now, because it can be so deeply integrated. Because now Sky has like the direct experience of the Aave code base, and as an end user, if you use USDS, you can receive these tokens in Spark, for instance, as like a part of like, you want to get rewarded for savings. Well, you can get regular rewards. You can just get like more USDS tokens, or you can get something, maybe you believe in the collaboration with Aave. Well, then you can get the Spark tokens because they sort of represent like integration with DeFi, working on the Aave code base, integrating with Aave. And it's just like more options to the end user that feel more like crypto and unique to sort of what you can do with DeFi. But it's the same, like you're holding a stable coin ultimately, right? So it's like it's a very convenient way to get these things delivered to you.
So it seems like, just summarizing what we've talked about so far, in the very early days, everything was super ideological. Everything was very technologically driven, right? Because there weren't any users, there weren't any products. Everything felt kind of abstract. It was very ideologically motivated. Now, fast forward, there's much more of a focus on product and shipping things that people actually want. And maybe that's just because it's been 7 years and people want to actually use things. And maybe it's because there's external competition now, right? There's, USDC didn't exist back then, and more centralized like stable coins like Tether, right, provide a little bit of competition. And so DeFi feels like it's in this place where it's trying to say, hey, what is the unique value proposition that DeFi has? And that's the way that I understand Sky, and kind of really leaning into things like token rewards that would be impossible for centralized competitors to do. So maybe this would be a good way to lean in or to introduce the audience to this whole Sky Aave Force. And maybe Stani, can I pick on you here to give us like the scope or like the outline of what this initiative actually is, and then we can unpack the details.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe I will explain a little bit of the background story, and I mean, Aave and Maker and like basically Sky, we've contributed in the past, for example, like what you mentioned with the D3M module. So that was effectively a way to mint DAI back in the days into Aave and provide that kind of like liquidity when we have liquidity crunches. So like there's been like history of different kinds of initiatives that we work together. And actually, when I had the idea about ETHLend and creating this ability of like borrow against your collateral, and one of the issues was back in those days is that we didn't really have a stable coin on Ethereum, which was quite funny. Like
Yeah.
you the only thing you could do actually, you borrowed ETH against your shit coins, like in the very early versions of ETHland.
Yeah.
And then we had like USD pegged ETH. So you borrow like 1,000 USD ETH that is pegged on USD, and you return the same amount. So you didn't have this like token that represents stable value. So obviously for us, like when we started to see DAI coming in, that was like a big thing, because like we actually realized that, actually you can now build a really good use case. And because we came from the perspective of like, how do you make this possible on chain without a stable coin and make a good product out of it? And it was really, really niche and almost impossible. And DAI kind of like proved the case of like, okay, you have stable value, so now you can actually create these use cases where you collateralize ETH, borrow DAI, other assets, and so forth. So that actually sparked us a little bit of like ability to innovate and build a better product. So, and at that point, that was 2018 early. Basically, from there, we decided that, to us to get this whole thing to scale, we have to just eliminate one step by step all these like middle processes of like, how do you create a loan request and whatnot. We changed into a more peer-to-pool model instead of peer-to-peer model, and try to eliminate each step. And now over the years, obviously Aave has grown to be kind of like a leading lending and borrowing protocol. And we've seen now that, to grow this market, we have to go like beyond the existing DeFi ecosystem. Like we can't just like satisfy the existing whales and like the marginal people who come into the space, but we have to like actually like put two big brands together, Sky and Aave, and grow the whole DeFi pie. So that's the whole idea and initiative behind it. And obviously it's not just basically like, me and Rune, doing these podcasts and like talking about it, but actually there's product initiatives there. So effectively, one of the main things that we're doing is we're listing the USDS into Aave, and also activating the D3M based on all these different markets that Aave has. So the main Aave market, the Lido market, and future market that brings opportunity to Sky. And this is just an example of like, how two big DeFi projects can actually collaborate across DeFi to gain more users into the space. And then obviously going even further, what Rune mentioned about Spark, there's going to be a separate market as well that is, it's a collaboration between the Aave and Spark communities, where also you're going to have these stacked incentives. So I think we talk a lot about rewards and incentives, but what Rune actually said a moment ago makes a lot of sense, because it's a way of actually distributing value or ownership across a financial infrastructure. And that's also that brings people, whether it's like retail or institutional, down the line. And our focus is purely on building just a better product. That's how we wake up every day and try to improve and just build a better experience and close the gap between where we are now in DeFi and where rest of the world is actually interacting with financial opportunities.
Can you explain, just for the audience, what we've now referenced this a couple of times, the D3M module, just like how that actually works in practice mechanically, and then why was that a part of the deal? Like, what is the benefit to both Sky and Aave in terms of activating this particular module? Like I saw there was a $100 million facility for the Lido market, for instance. Just help unpack for the audience why that's a part of this initiative.
So originally, the original Maker protocol invented, or at least was really early a really early system of the kind we call the CDP model, which is this like sort of you generate stable coins by basically putting higher value of ETH, and then if you put $150 of ETH, you can generate $100 of stable coins. And then now it's stable as long as the value of the $150 of ETH doesn't go too low. And then you liquidate all the that's like the classic way that stable coins work, right? And then what basically was realized over time was that that's just like one of the many models you can use to back and generate stablecoins with. So basically with Sky, the system sort of transforming into one where it's kind of agnostic around what is the what's the fundamental way that the stablecoins are backed and generated. That could be many different ways, and one of the ways is, I mean, and this is sort of the D3M model, is you actually just deposit into other protocols. So you just sort of like you kind of, I mean, basically it's, well, the simple way to think of it is that Sky can just generate USDS tokens by basically depositing USDS tokens into Aave, and then getting the kind of the Aave tokens in return, and just say, well, we can sort of pre-mint essentially, or rather it's happening atomically, right? But in a sense, like, you create the stablecoin first, and then you allocate it, and then you get the collateral for it afterwards. And this is like fundamentally how USDS works in Sky. So this is also how it works with Spark, which is basically just a fork of Aave. So that's the similar thing of like depositing, like sort of creating a stablecoin first and then allocating it to get the backing. And you can also do this with like, I mean, you could also just allocate directly into something like tokenized treasuries. You do the same thing. Like that's how RWA basically works currently. I mean, that's how it's been done. And I mean, that's also how Maker did it for years, basically, at large scale.
Interesting. So it's a new it's a new way of creating it's like basically new mechanism for minting the stable coin. And the benefit is it's demand for the stable. And then on the Aave side of things, it actually helps you target a specific interest rate, right? Like this was when there were liquidity crunches of something like DAI, now USDS. On Aave, there would be these crazy spikes in interest rates. And now what you can just do is programmatically mint, more and more USDS to target like a 4%, borrow rate or something like that. And then if it goes underneath that rate, you can remove some of the supply. And
yeah, and it actually we have to go back in time, because like at some point there was truly like liquidity crunches in DeFi. Now obviously there's more liquidity, but essentially it allows that if there is a lot of demand, you basically have this additional liquidity source. And guaranteed liquidity there. So what you explain is accurate. So if there is too much demand, it means that the rates of stablecoins go high, and at that point, the only way to actually rebalance these rates based on these algorithms is to get new LPs. Getting new LPs obviously takes time, and you might have kind of like fluctuations between the cost of the liquidity. So D3M is interesting because you can pre-supply liquidity, so you can lower the actual rates, make it attractive, add additional liquidity, and it acts in some ways also like a liquidity distribution for Sky as well at the same time.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is like, I mean, so basically when you discuss it, you sort of discuss it as like, from the Aave's perspective, it's like stabilizing and sort of lowering the rates. From Sky's perspective, it's kind of like, it's sort of like tapping into higher rates,
right?
And also kind of like being able to access wherever like where the need is, right? So and I think actually, like, I mean, this concept again of like, instead of having like the Maker's own native system that does this, and then then the ecosystem tries to kind of like make that win and dominate everything, and everyone should use that. That's kind of the old school. That's like build it and they will come, and sort of the technology thing. And again, like the new way of thinking is like product focused and user acquisition focused. And the kind of the tagline I like to that is kind of in contrast to build and they will come, is meet the user where they are, right? And so
that's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like, I mean, and it applies to everything, including like branding and a bunch of other stuff. Also, yeah, and like, but then also with the D3M model, it's like it's basically like it's about like how to build something so that instead of having the users to come and use some specific thing, you like figure out, well, they're in Aave, that's the most popular place. Like that's what borrowers like to use. They feel safe, they feel familiar going on Aave.com and borrowing from there. And they're willing to pay a premium for that, right? There's way more demand for that than anything else because that's what they're used to. So that's what you should
just use Aave.
Just use Aave.
So that's the right. I mean, that's the perfect place to deliver that stablecoin liquidity, right? So Sky can focus on growing the part of that really matters, which is the stablecoin demand, the savings sort of user experience, and basically outsource, you could say, the like finding the borrowers to somebody who specializes in that, right?
You know why I like that too? I mean, that also implies I think there's been maybe a lack of focus on distribution in crypto as well, and who has access to users and that sort of thing. And I'd love to see that thinking start to creep in, because I mean, this space needs more users, and it's interesting to see like the kind of the point of leverage being also who has access to users. And I do have a question for you guys, in terms of, you know, how you guys think about. Obviously, you're not unilaterally in charge of either of these protocols, but the future of you know, cooperation in between Sky and Aave. There's been a little bit of a convergence in terms of business model as well, though, because now Aave has Go, which is a stable coin, and Spark, as you noted, is a fork of Aave. And so like very separate businesses now look a little bit more similar. And so maybe there's like a little bit of an area where you're competing a little bit. So we'd just love to get a sense of like how much you guys think about like competing versus cooperating as like product lines converge a little bit.
I have a good take on this because like obviously, like functionally speaking, Go, the Aave native stablecoin, it has one big purpose is simply to provide predictable borrow costs for the Aave users. So one thing we ask a lot of Aave users is that kind of like if there will be a god for like, you know, for the product and they can decide anything that could change.
You can wave a magic wand.
Exactly. You have the magic wand essentially. And one of the things is that they want predictability on these borrow rates, which is interesting because like over time you could quantify like average how much you're paying for the rates, but the kind of like the mental model is to understand how much you're paying into the future. And that's where Go essentially came to serve that purpose and add also additional revenue for the Aave DAO. But when I look actually like the competition, I don't actually see these models to competing. In fact, actually Go is used mostly also to in staking activity to secure the protocol and bring that additional value also where USDS is supplied and backstopping the protocol. But I think that the real big point, and this is something that Rune has been talking about, is that the actual real competition is these bigger stable coins like USDC and USDT. And I think it's a really big actually opportunity because if you look at the lending space and we look at the past 5 years, and I started building ETHLend back in 2017 when we saw a lot of centralized lenders. So we saw Salt Lending, BlockFi coming, Celsius, Genesis Lending, and they all raised hundreds of millions of dollars, essentially just like to build a business around lending. And all of them failed because they were built in a very wrong way fundamentally, whereas we have proven resiliency on the lending side. So
and they looked invincible at one point.
Exactly.
Like the BlockFi looked like they had escape velocity, and I mean Celsius, they were like huge whales in DeFi. For folks that missed this, as like their trading desk was like they were pretty degen. I mean, back in the day,
they went to DeFi because of the same reason. They have the transparency. They can see the execution. There's guarantees from like the smart contracts and governance and whatnot. So like that's kind of is coming for the stablecoins as well. So we're looking into resiliency. So how we actually can create more resilient infrastructure for savings, payments, and whatnot. And if you look at the existing stablecoin landscape, it's very centralized. And the more time passes, it's going to be even more centralized because the same thing that happened with lending and all these businesses coming in and taking opportunities, the same thing will happen with stablecoins. So what we will see is that the fintechs are coming in with their stable coins and trying to capture the market share and profit from that. Then you have a new wave of stable coins where essentially you give a little bit of the profit and the next wave gives a little bit more. Whereas if you look at basically what USDS is doing and Sky is that they're redistributing everything out essentially. And that's the kind of like a way of doing it in DeFi is that you build an infrastructure that is valuable and then you can actually distribute everything for the sake of growth and getting adoption for the technology.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I agree that I think the fundamental way to sum it up is basically it's DeFi versus TradFi, right? That's what matters, and it's just because it's because you gotta right now the opportunity is to grow the pie,
right? Not
compete over slices of the pie. And I think actually that generally, like all DeFi protocols will converge to kind of deliver mostly all the same primitives because it's just so easy to replicate. Like it's all there, it's all open source. It's like And so, and I mean, I encourage that. I think that's great. And it's one of the key underlying ideas for the star model of like, you want to have multiple sort of specialized, smaller specialized independent projects in the broader Sky ecosystem. And it's not like, so the thing that sets you apart in DeFi when you replicate all the primitives across like every project, right? So all the stars, they'll also like sort of offer all the basics. And instead what they'll do is they will appeal to different demographics, and they will kind of, I guess, in their user experience, they'll emphasize different parts of what they can do, because that's what fits to the market they're trying to target, right?
Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Supra, the new blazing fast, vertically integrated L1, which helps you scale your dApp. If you are a builder, you're probably dealing with some combination of cost, complexity, and fragmentation of existing solutions. So if you're building over an ETH L2 land, everything's feeling a little bit fragmented at the moment. And if you're building in Solana, everything is fast and on one layer, but maybe you're limited in terms of what you can do with your AppSpace. So Supra is rolling out a new product called Supra Containers. So you can head over to supra.com/containers. To learn more. They offer dedicated customizable app spaces running on Supra's 500,000 TPS Layer 1 blockchain. That gives you complete control over gas tokens and fees. So some cool things you can do, you get the freedom you can use your own token, create local fee markets, or even go gasless, whatever you want. So this product isn't live yet, but because you are a faithful listener of Bell Curve, you get notified first. So head over to supra.com/containers. Thank me later. You know what that actually reminds me of a little bit is, you look at banks, right, and say, hey, they're all banks, right? Like, what's the difference between, Bank of America and Citi and Goldman, and anyone that actually knows banking is like, those are extremely different entities, right? Some, really focused and crushed asset management, right? Like maybe the Morgan Stanleys of the world, and others make their money in different ways. But, what looks like a bank on the surface is there are many, numerous different business lines and, different ways that their customers, like they position themselves differently for different customer segments. Do you think that's the way that it's roughly going to evolve in DeFi as well? We're going to converge on this same set of product lines, but maybe we're always going to think of Sky a little bit more from the standpoint of a stable coin, and Aave a little bit more from the standpoint of borrow lend, or is that roughly the way to think about it?
For Aave, I would say the main focus definitely is the lending borrowing. And I would say like Go will grow increasingly with the Aave actual deployments, where it can facilitate predictability of the borrow rates. And that's, for example, what we're working now and focusing quite a lot is to bring Go into these other deployments that we have and create that yield, borrow cost predictability. And then even though, so like we have all these different protocols and DAOs, end of the day, you need that composability. So if you look at traditional finance, they mainly deal with, especially like investment banks, asset managers, they mainly deal with other banks effectively. But the main point here is that what we're doing, which is very unique with Sky and Aave, is that we're actually taking all the available incentives and we're stacking them into the same kind of like liquidity pipeline. And that attracts that additional liquidity into the space and interest, because if we are able to create better opportunities that in TradFi, do it in a decentralized, resilient way, make it fun, make actually useful products, that will be attractive, like a holistic offering for more people to come.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also just like the fact that you have these kind of initiatives, like you have from Sky and Aave, of like building this kind of, I really think of it like the no-brainer market, right? Like it's going to be like, it's like the best of both protocols, right? And you have something like that, you have that kind of collaboration, and you have just like the more general positioning of like Sky and Aave. Like it's kind of, it goes beyond integrations. It's kind of like sending a message also, which is this sort of fundamental message of like, grow the pie, right? And just like be mature and, if you look at, I guess, TradFi, or you look at other examples of like other industries, you have like, the really large companies, the really large economic players, they all benefit immensely from like trading and interacting with each other, right?
Right.
So that's just, that should be the focus if we want to take DeFi to the next level and bring it to the mass market and focus on delivering it to end users. And I think crypto very much kind of is coming out of a past that is a lot more Bitcoin versus altcoins, or
Yeah.
meme coin A versus meme coin B, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's a zero-sum game, and it's all about like if my coin's gonna go up, that means those other they have to move the.
It's not
money
enough that
from
I
their
win;
coin
they
to-
must lose.
Yeah, but that's kind of like that mentality has existed quite a lot, even in DeFi, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's just, it's just like immaturity, basically, I guess, right? And then I guess to the point you were making earlier, of like now you have, Aave and Sky, suddenly they're making lots of revenue. It's just like value generation. It's just like obviously, unavoidably, it's positive sum now. So suddenly, it just gets. It just becomes clear that this is where the real opportunity is to kind of focus on just like growing, and there'll be enough for everyone.
Well,
there's so much opportunity.
Completely. And I actually see both of your guys' seat as being applications, as being a lot of the tribalism in crypto is really between the Bitcoins of the world versus the Ethereums of now it's Ethereum and Solana, and everyone's kind of yapping at each other. But both, I think, Aave and Sky are good examples of, Rune, I saw you in Singapore at Breakpoint talking about, expanding over into Solana. And I don't know, Stani, if Aave has explicit plans, but I talked to Mark, and he was very enthusiastic about Solana, has been tweeting about it. So I'm assuming something might be on the horizon there. But it's cool to see you guys extending olive branches and going in. And I think that maybe will actually be really positive for tribalism.
In Aave's perspective, we already we're also developing the Move implementation for Optus. So like we're purely looking where are the users and how we can expand beyond EVM. So like obviously like we see a lot of value in EVM and on Ethereum ecosystem, and a lot of financial institutions start from there. BlackRock is a great example, and there's a bunch of other ones. But like purely, if you think about like software perspective, like if we have a piece of software that enables financial opportunities, it should be everywhere where these users are. So it shouldn't look into even like what networks are. And I think it's the battle like between like Ethereum and Solana isn't really productive, because end of the day, both of these communities have something to give. They have their user bases, they have their like communities. So for us, it's actually like a great opportunity. We're like, well, we just build everywhere where there's actually users and can provide value, because we don't really know which one of these will be like, the future of like future Macs and PCs and whatever, like, or like iPhones in terms of distribution. So we have to be everywhere from that perspective.
I have a question for you guys, actually. Maybe when you're thinking about expanding over into Solana, for instance, there are existing competitors, right, on the stablecoin front, and there's existing competitors on the lending front. Maybe Camino would be an example of that. And I actually remember doing a podcast with Lido. We were talking with the Chorus One team because they were very helpful, and they initially kind of built out the expansion for Lido onto Solana. And they did end up working for a number of reasons, but one of them was like there is this like community kind of tribal feel, and the users are like, I'm supporting the Solana solution. And there was also a question of incentives. So I think they were talking about it was difficult for them to compete with Marinade at the time. This was pre-Jito even, where 100% of Marinade's emissions were basically going towards this, and Lido was like, well, I can't emit every single chain that I'm on. So how do you guys think as app developers, like the trade of like some of the complexities of moving to another ecosystem and maybe competing with some of the incumbents over there?
So actually, I think with USDS and this whole effort that's gone into like really trying to position Sky and USDS and what how exactly does it go to market? I think it has a very interesting and like very specific position, which is that it's not like a regular stablecoin. It's not a centralized stablecoin like USDC and USDT. It doesn't even really try to compete with them directly. It actually tries to sort of complement them as like the simplest possible step that you can take to go into kind of like as much as possible what you can get from DeFi without making it complicated or like without like sort of starting to really get into, you have to think about things like risk.
Right.
So something like that actually doesn't exist on Solana at all currently. Like, so and also actually there's nothing like it because of the token rewards. They're sort of the thing that really positions USDS like completely uniquely. And you were kind of making that point earlier of like, this is already, because where stablecoins are already going is they're going into these like yield-bearing stablecoins. So the assumption is already that there's no profit margin. Like there's no leftover value, even if you like if you just back your token entirely with like something like treasuries or whatever,
Right.
you have to give all of that return to the end user, and then you're still just like you're just making the bare minimum cut. Like this is like the starting point. Then you have to figure out how you're gonna then make something unique from there, right? And so with USDS and Sky, it's basically so one is the token rewards, and then the second thing is what we were talking about earlier, like the ability to allocate into like where the good returns are, right? So Sky is the biggest in RWA and has generated like really good the ability to offer like give a really good savings rate based on treasuries, right? But now the next frontier is like, well, tapping into every opportunity for value creation on Aave, for instance, and things like Athena and like all these other things that are able that Sky's been able to do. That actually also is, I mean, the reason why suddenly Sky can move so fast is because now it's going through the Spark process, right? So it's like a more specialized process, and Sky itself just focuses on building more of these processes rather than kind of doing it directly itself, which then also is the thing that sort of like goes back around to the fact you can have the token rewards that represents each of these specialized processes. And
I mean, obviously, I think just like the best product wins. Essentially, that's what users want. So like it can be like a while, like people they have like various reasons to use different kinds of protocols, but at the end of the day, they want to use something that is really powerful, solves a lot of things for them, and it's easy to use. And I actually like in finance, it's probably one of those fields where there is not really like winner takes all. There's multiple winners. It might be from like 5 to 10 to even 20 different types of projects essentially. And I think that's a good thing because you need that diversification. And I mean, for me, when I think about Solana, like we talk to a lot of these DeFi builders there and kind of like understand what perspective they're building, what they're trying to attract, and actually try to work with a lot of these people. And I mean, I've been in collaboration with one of the earliest projects on Solana that are focused on lending and borrowing. So like Solana by itself isn't like something that's is new to me. Like it's something that I've been looking into for a long time. But effectively, I want to see people actually creating that use case and getting excited about DeFi. And that's the same way, for example, what we've been thinking about Aptos is that there's a lot of great builders, and obviously that's a new code base, a new language for us, and we want to go and learn there and support the ecosystem. So I do think that that's really important, that all these projects and developers feel comfortable, and there needs to be some sort of opportunity. Otherwise, it's kind of like you get into weird battles, and I think we're kind of like too old for that.
I also think that like, I mean, I was saying this earlier, right? That like, I think Aave is like the first like DeFi product that really like became a product. And I think like, I'm like really, I mean, I think Aave has such a strong moat in like how it's built. It's got sort of two, right? It's got the like the Lindy effect, which I mean, Maker also has that, right? And has that. That's like a major part of it, right? But Aave has that. Plus this like very, very unique kind of vibe and brand and culture, right? Yeah. That I think is so powerful that like Aave is just like, you're
talking about Rave, right? That's the
I mean, it's the whole thing. It's like end to end. And I feel like I feel like you guys didn't sit down and design it. You were kind of like, it just happened. It came and
it was very, very organic, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened in Maker. Was just more like it kind of grew in so many directions that it became less. I think you wouldn't like with Aave. You really just like you just know what you mean when you're talking about like the Aave vibe. It's like very unique, and it's very scaled up, and so it's like. And one of the things that's cool about it is that it's sort of, I don't know how to put it, like it's a little bit like edgy. Is like a bad term, right? But it's like. It's not. I mean, it's just
character.
It's not, yeah. No. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's also like it's kind of like cute, Also, right? Yeah. It's like
we call it cutility. Cutility.
I mean, I think that is so unique and so like.
It is.
I mean, once I used to be fully in the build and they will come camp. So I used to be like, why are they spending? Why are they spending so much time differentiating the vibe like this? Later, I was like, damn. We should have been doing that the whole time.
Yeah.
But I really feel like
Sky now has a very strong brand, though. I think maybe in a slightly different way, but it's also extremely differentiated.
Yeah, but it's. I mean,
sending the good vibes all around here. In this,
like
in this
Sky's like I mean, I think like Sky is a lot more, I would say, trying to like do this kind of really broad appeal of like, I mean, I feel like it's USDS is like, I mean, if you look at the name USDS, that's Sky picked versus Go for Aave, right? Go is like, I mean, Go is like that's the perfect stable coin for Aave because it's sort of like, it really, it like builds on top of the, like it sort of like taps into like, I mean, there's, what is it, 20 billion? That's
20 billion.
They're really locked in to Aave, I think, because it's like it's a combination of all these things. And and my point is that like, obviously you can't, I mean, I don't think you can compete with Aave on being Aave, right? That's just, Aave's just always going to win that. And then you have something like Sky, which is like deliberately more it's trying to be a little bit more, I guess, I mean, almost like generic in a sense, right? Like really broadly appealing. But then the real other part of that is then you have the stars that are like, and that's an attempt to sort of, kind of, what if you could try to, you have another attempt at getting something like what Aave has, but for a different demographic, and then you can do another attempt, and you can just make different versions of this, but trying to target these like different specific demographics.
You know why I deeply understand that is because Blockworks, actually, we define ourselves now as a house of brands. So there's the Blockworks umbrella brand, but Bell Curve is a brand, Empire is a brand, Forward Guidance is a brand. On the market, it's the exact same thought process, actually, of, hey, we can actually target different segments here if we cut up our customer base and create these unique brands.
Good thing about that is that, and we do that a little bit on the Avara level, for like Aave Labs and Lens and Family, is that you can create different audiences. So basically like, while, everyone likes a cute logo and whatever, but then like you might have a completely different type of audience you want to tap into that maybe isn't even here in our space, and you kind of like are trying to find a way to attach or like create a way with a brand. So brand really plays a big role, and for us, with the actual like the utility or like the cute ghost, it started from the idea of like, finance in general, like financial industry tries to be very serious. Like they try to like show like we've been here from like
they do
200 years ago. Like we're like,
see some of that gray hair.
Exactly. You try to like convince people, and our idea was that, well, you don't need to like convince anything, like, because like everything is, you build on smart contracts, you can build resiliency, you have this transparency, like you don't need to bullshit basically, because everything is like on chain and contracts and whatnot. So why don't we just make it more playful? And also like it played out really well, and that was a big bet as well to do, because we were like either this direction or that direction, and we just like basically followed our hearts, and we were like, well, let's just try something fun and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think it also, I mean, it's it's gamification in part, right?
Yeah.
And that's also, I mean, that's the same. I mean, maybe one answer is that the user base is changing. I mean, it's like DeFi is for younger people.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right?
I think it is too. There's even since I'm not as OG as you get, but even like 2018 to 20, like Blockworks got founded in 2018, and it is a completely different industry. And in some way, it's less ideological, I think, than it used to be. I will say also, I think the average caliber of person in this industry is higher probably than it was at various points. Like maybe I just have a very event-centric focuses, but we used to host we've hosted events for a long time, and even though the industry is much larger, but I think there's more serious, like the human capital of the industry has expanded quite a bit in the last. But how have you guys seen it change? Like, what are the big changes from your perspective?
Well, I've seen more kind of like institutional interests, like I think like both of us we've had this like bank meetings like years ago, and we walk into a financial institution, and we educate a bunch of people in the boardroom about DeFi, and no one asks questions, doesn't really care, and you leave from the meeting basically like thinking of like, okay, these folks will never get it,
What do you guys wear when you walk into one of those meetings? Are you rocking a t-shirt?
I'm like this,
or?
Yeah. It's usually like, I mean, maybe like you have a button down sometimes, but like it's mainly like this. I mean, this is like our like outfit, like our uniform. So.
I feel like it works. Yeah. What is that? I mean, what do you guys think? So now there obviously are, it's like the meme, but the institutions are slowly coming, right? And BlackRock is probably the best example of this. We've got Bitcoin ETFs, ETH ETFs, but also they're really building things on chain, right? Like BUIDL, actual on-chain funds, RWAs. And so, if the final boss here is TradFi, how do you guys as protocol founders think about that? There obviously is some amount of cooperation. There's a little bit of maybe long-term competition. Maybe it's co-opetition. Like, how do you guys think about working with the institutions as they're here today?
I mean, I think that Maker did the whole RWA thing like maybe 2 years ago, started really scaling it up. So I think a couple of years ago, this kind of phase began where institutions were willing to like work with crypto because they could make money. And it's like, oh, they pay, and so we can do some work with them now. And it's like de-risked enough that if they pay us, we'll do some work with them. I think now what's coming is this, I think a realization of the values embedded in like sort of modern DeFi and modern crypto being like actually having a competitive advantage. And like, so for instance, this idea of like the best way to make a compelling DeFi product is to have some gamification into it, right? And don't make it like fully like gray hair. And I feel like that's now, like one thing is, well, the user base is like younger and a different generation and so on. So it appeals to them. But I also think what's happening is like when I talk to the people from BlackRock, right? And they call their token BUIDL and they have this whole explanation of why it's called BUIDL. But I mean, it's like, I feel like that's a little bit of a gamification.
It is
that BlackRock is like
that is definitely,
doing through DeFi, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, also when, and what that also kind of unlocks now is that that people from BlackRock, they'll see like how well the fact that you have the native token rewards built into Sky that you can get with USDS, it makes sense that by having different options and the different tokens, they represent sort of different brands and different values, and that's going to give different options to all the users that are ultimately going to be the source of demand that can then like allocate into their treasuries. And I think that that was way too advanced and sort of out there a couple of years ago. And instead now they're trying to learn because like they're taking it seriously enough. And I guess that actually, I mean, a guy from BlackRock explained this to me, that it's like they need to make money from it first before they even bother like thinking about the future. Like they don't like experiments that are like, it's a bunch of promises and like we're going to do an experiment. And if they start making money from it, then suddenly they'll start like really like, they're like, okay, we're making money now. So how can we make more money?
Yeah. It's kind of the best and worst thing about finance, right? It's just very honest about what they're after, right? It is like, we are here to make money and there's no bones about it. It is, it's not the idealist that I think a lot of us in crypto kind of operate. There's a lot of idealists here, but it is honest in a sense. And it's cool that they can make money, right? Like it's cool that they're actually incentivized to take this industry seriously and build things out.
And I think the more we see institutions coming into the space, the bigger these network effects are within the space. So I think these early adopters, they have the biggest kind of like arbitrage distribution, like the biggest opportunities. So, and obviously like it makes sense that these are like, asset managers instead of like banks, because banks have higher fiduciary responsibilities. So like we'll see more and more funds coming in. And I think this is like really exciting because like we've been building this for years between like kind of like, if you look at like DeFi Summer back in 2020, it's a lot about like distributing like governance power, distributing like farming tokens, shit coins and whatnot. And we actually might have a interesting opportunity where, we're bringing the whole like financial space into on-chain. And these two innovations, both Sky and Aave, are like in the like forefront. So like we kind of have an obligation to be here now. Like it just feels like we have to be here because there's this like a big transformation of financial infrastructure and the way we think about capital, the way we build products and distribute wealth and value. And it's going to be like a big shift that is happening, but it takes like next couple of decades to actually progress.
Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, maybe final closing question here is this, catchphrase DeFi Renaissance has been getting thrown around a lot. And I think what that just really means is, I don't know if you guys remember DeFi Spartan or DGen Spartan put that like DeFi bear market, 36-month tracker for a long time. which is really funny. And honestly, around the time that tracker ended, I feel like honestly both Aave and Maker and now Sky were good examples of, okay, you guys were actually printing real, generating real fees, and there was actually activity on these platforms. And honestly, not that this is the point, but it's always nice. The token prices have done pretty well in the last year or two. And so I think one of the other nice things too is there's this, high FDV, low float sort of meta, and a lot of the, the tokenomics of both Sky and Aave look a lot better than some of these new competitors. And so I would love to get a sense of, when you hear this DeFi Renaissance, like what does that mean to the two of you? And what are you guys kind of excited about from the DeFi side of things? Like, be it some of these new institutions coming in, obviously there's the whole rebrand and, onboarding stars and all that type of thing. But what are you guys kind of excited about in the realm of DeFi?
Well, yeah, going back to this token economics, I do think that both of these projects has been able to actually, first of all, the hardest thing, build something really valuable that is useful, and also actually in both cases useful for any type of market cycle. Essentially, like they have a really strong utility, and then having a strong sense of community that actually is attached to the project, and actually and that's a great thing, because like you actually you're building this publicly with group of people that have different types of goals within the community, being able to do that and being able to be profitable. So, if you think about governance in general, like it's more closer to governments than like, hierarchical businesses that can operate really quickly, move fast. So being able to operate in this more of like a governmental kind of like a structure is really interesting. It's not easy, but that's something we've been able to do. I'm super excited about obviously everything we're doing now with Sky and Aave and this collaboration, and where it actually goes to growing the pie, and then more of like a bigger kind of like an initiative that we have with Aave 2030, where we basically want to keep building innovation as the DeFi space grows. Aave V4 is big part of that, bringing a lot of interesting innovation from like liquidity premiums and more capital efficiency, and just basically more risk management tools. Like we just want to incrementally build better and better software and better products, and just win more users and win more adoption. And that's the kind of end game. So like if we can get institutions more comfortable on the technology, on the brands and things we're doing, we're going to see big waves of adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I think that DeFi Renaissance means that now DeFi will sort of return to its rightful place as basically the main thing that defines crypto, and the thing that
Turn of the king.
Yeah, and I mean, well, it briefly
nerds.
happened during DeFi summer, but actually for a very long time, like DeFi, like mostly it's been, I mean, people have been into like meme coins and like weird infrastructure stuff where they don't really understand why it's value, so it's potential pure play, so that's like all that kind
hard
of
to monetize as well, those infrastructures.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, and it's all the, I guess it's all the, I mean, it's the thing that really defines crypto. It's both the good and bad of it, right? That it's so driven by greed. Yeah. And the problem is that the real use cases, I mean, it's taken a long time for it to really find the product market, because that's just how it works. Same for like, you look at the internet or whatever, right? Obviously it doesn't happen in one day. So the problem with DeFi has been, all right, there's potential, but then like it's the only place where real stuff is happening. But then when you used to then actually look at the numbers, it's like, okay, well, so the real things are happening, but not that much of it. So let's go and kind of instead fantasize about this stuff that where it's like pre anything happening. So it could be sky's the limit, right? Well, and then what happened now is, well, we did the hard work basically in, I mean, particularly Sky and Aave, but also some of the other protocols, right?
Yeah.
People actually just went in the trenches, and they built and they shipped, and they started thinking about users, and they started thinking about product market fit and delivering the last mile, all of this stuff. And it succeeded, and now basically Sky and Aave particularly is generating massive revenues. And you're getting to the point where like, I feel like it's almost like, I don't know what to call it, something like sunk cost fallacy of like the market and the mind space, like the mind share. People they're not ready to accept that they have been distracting themselves with stuff that fundamentally it appealed to them because it didn't really do much real things, right? And it was more like these OG, like sort of like old school crypto stuff that didn't do anything, so it can go anywhere, right?
Well, I got a question for you on this as well. Maybe this is a little bit more of an Ethereum specific question, but I saw Kane tweeted out a couple of months ago, something to the effect of, well, wasn't super happy about like his perception of how the EF has talked about DeFi on Ethereum in general, and it was kind of this idea of like, hey guys, there's $50 billion worth of TVL on the chain, and this is what people come to Ethereum to do, and it seemed like there was a little bit of more of a maybe a distaste of some of the more speculative elements around finance and DeFi, and it's like, hey, we should be building other things X, Y, and Z, and Kane's perspective at that time was, well, this is what has been built, and this is what people are using. Like, have you guys ever felt that at all before, or what's your perspective on that?
I mean, I really don't. I think the point of what let's call it blue chip DeFi is doing, right? Sky and Aave and some of the other top ones. Like, the point is, these projects don't need some kind of blessing to succeed, right? And that's what all the other stuff needs, because you don't know what they're actually doing, right? You don't know where the real value comes from. Mm-hmm. For the established DeFi protocols, I mean, the value comes from executing, and some like nothing else really matters. So, I think I think it's more like this is just the nature of crypto, of greed, of markets, and so on. But and what's amazing is now it's coming full circle, right? And the market and the industry and the community is like waking up to the fact that, okay, this is where the real value is.
Yeah.
And Stani basically came up with the perfect way to kind of encapsulate this with DeFi Renaissance, right? Of like it's sort of catching on, and I feel like it's still like seen as like sort of alpha, right? It's kind of like it's not yet like consensus, because people are still there. They got some pretty big bags, some infrastructure number 700 or something, right? And it's gonna take a while to kind of process that. Yeah.
And I think like a lot of there's so much infrastructure, and it feels like like if you're starting to think about like kind of like a financial platform, like you start to seeing like so many networks, L2s, and effectively they're all like finding from the same users,
right?
And there's like some of them like do not have any innovation, some have like incremental innovation there, and you still kind of like create that network, and you're trying to like attract the same kind of like projects and whatnot. And I mean, we solved from Aave's perspective by just being everywhere, but also like we're not sure like how these projects they will solve their monetization, profitability, because sequence fees, those will go down. Like users, they don't like, there's going to be expectations that users don't want to pay fees down the line, and the more time passes, the more it becomes clear. And I think the EF perspective, Rune said really well, like that DeFi by itself will stand whether like people give a blessing or not, because effectively it has all the fundamentals there why it's needed. It has that pure protocol market fits, and there's like a high utility for that, and they're agnostic to use cases like stablecoins, savings, borrowing, lending, that they're applicable as a financial layer to inject into these opportunities. So I think I would say that effectively from EF standpoint, like obviously it serves Ethereum as a community and EF to see these new use cases emerge. Obviously it's also servicing us, because let's say if there's like a interesting like let's say social ecosystem and decentralized social ecosystem, there's interesting refi ecosystem, and they all need finance for some reasons, then DeFi can plug into those things. So it's actually a good thing for us that people build all kinds of stuff on chain. But fundamentally now people are realizing that, it's actually about how these networks are profitable, how they can sustain themselves, because if they can't, then it's got hard. So we're in a kind of like a decade where all this sustainability was based on like inflation rewards, basically kind of like incentivizing by distributing ownership. Mm-hmm. But now it's the time of actually seeing like which one of these protocols actually paid out and sustained. Right. And if you sustain, then you can actually grow and have good economics there.
And one thing I want to add is also like I don't want to trash talk infrastructure projects, right? 'Cause
Either,
they're
or
like
the EF in general. Like,
No, they're
I mean, just responding
all of these
to,
are super.
We,
and
we love infrastructure.
but they are super important to like
we
grow.
love it. We love it.
It's there to like it's there to scale the industry, right? But
Yeah.
the thing is, it's not gonna. I mean, you were making it, but like it's not gonna scale if it,
Well,
if
you need
no
the
one knew
users.
it's coming.
Who's
yeah.
the end user?
There
right?
needs to right the benefits of crypto, which I think primarily, I mean, it's basically stablecoins and DeFi, and that's gonna merge. So it's really just DeFi, right? That benefit needs to be delivered to more end users,
Yeah.
and to do that, you need apps, right? You need the app layer, and it's kind of the old school thesis of like you have infrastructure and then you have apps, and you sort of switch between. And now the balance is shifting towards the apps, and that's DeFi Renaissance, right? That's like Aave. That's like that's a really, like I said, it's sort of this very original DeFi product with the transformation to Sky. That's actually also, that is also, it's not just like a change to being product focused. It's also actually that Sky itself has its own app, which is actually brand new, right? So that Sky.money is like, that is now, like now there is like a single app you can go and use it. That wasn't the case with Maker. It was like more like a pure infrastructure in that sense. And I think like, yeah, it's just, it's amazing that it's now coming to this. These protocols are growing.
Took almost a decade, but now we're here.
Yeah, but it's gonna happen. Like we're seeing it. Like Aave is like growing like crazy. Maker and DAI like had this massive growth explosion in DeFi summer. It went to like 10 billion DAI. Then it's stable. Like then it fell when sort of the bear market happened, right? And DAI kind of stabilized around 5 billion. And basically, the supply of DAI had been stable in this like really tight band of just like this is how much DAI demand there was, and that's it, and just like oscillated and sort of was really really stable. And actually like the community was this is a big part of the transformation. Like the community is looking like why is this happening? Like why is it not going up and down? Why is it staying at exactly like this, right? And now with Sky, with the new brands, with the new use cases, sort of the unique value prop of like you can get the token rewards and you can use it on the app, and it's all branded end to end to be more easy to use. For the first time, we're actually seeing that now the total supply is going up. So like the demand for this stablecoin is like starting to actually kind of incrementally, slow and steady, it's starting to increase. And it's hard. You can't exactly. It's very hard to track users in DeFi, right? But I don't think it's a stretch to attribute that to the fact that some new things have been released, and they've actually been in this like app focused and product focused way of like, we know who we're trying to appeal to, and then we build products that are sort of appealing to them. And then what's coming next is like, then you have Sky Aave Force and the integration of USDS. I'm super excited for that, right? I'm expecting that to grow, total. That's going to grow deposits into Aave. That's going to grow total demand for USDS. And then from there, it's just going to be more and more of this. And every time there's going to be, obviously there's going to be the superior solutions in DeFi. Yeah. They're going to convert users over. But also there's going to be something now that it gets a little bit more mature, a little bit more value generating, and it's going to be enough to like draw in some more people from the outside, right? And then the pie grows. And eventually, one day it's going to trickle down to the infrastructure layer even, So it's for everyone,
Yeah.
And interesting here is that these initiatives, they're not like VC driven or like VC kind of like suggested tactics. These are like, they come from the community. People have brainstorm how to actually make efficient protocols, make efficient economics there as well. So like that's I think something that we get quite often wrong, because like you see all this new DeFi comers and they raise a bunch of money from VCs and and then they go and try to like do the same playbooks, but like they always forget like you have to build a community, and the closer you are to the users and the community, the more actually you have a higher chances to succeed. And I think that's something that's both of like Sky and also Aave has done really well, being able to like build around good group of people.
What do you get? Last final question for you guys. I know we've gone on a little while here, but one other thing in crypto that at least I've noticed is it seems like when something really works, you kind of copy that thing and you don't really think first principles about trying to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. And the example that I would give you is that Bitcoin was the original, right? It was kind of the pioneer, and it pioneered all of these things. There's proof of work. There's also like a very flat, transparent supply schedule for the token. And there was this design philosophy of being super minimal, right? Like that's kind of like optimizing for simplicity over complexity. And actually, you see a lot of that in Ethereum. I think Ethereum has also optimized for a very flat sort of surface area, right? And they've kept, they wanted to push a lot of that complexity off of the base layer onto other layers like layer 2s. And you can't really do that as an app, right? Apps are kind of the opposite, is you actually want to eat that complexity and manage it and solve it, and that's how you get your reward. And so have you guys noticed similar, like, I think that a lot of protocols, I would be curious how you guys think of the approach to eating complexity versus being very minimally thin. And I guess this is kind of related to governance as well, but how do you guys think about that? Are you going out there and trying to eat complexity and build and ship products, or are you trying to be kind of decentralized and thin and neutral?
I mean, this is definitely a really essential question and challenge that the transformation to Sky aims to address, right? From Maker, because Maker had exactly this problem of like, it as it grew bigger and it had to handle all this money, it got more complex, and the governance couldn't really handle it. So now there's kind of like two fundamental solutions being introduced with Sky, right? So the first one is it's kind of like get the best of both worlds, but actually keep that thinner, more decentralized kind of characteristic, but enable scaling up, and that's just through like subdivision, right? So that's the start.
That's the
like,
stars.
You basically like you kind of carve out the complexity and put it into these different specialized projects, right? That can focus on the different challenges, and then they can have their own governance, and that governance can be more like it's just going to be more smooth if it's not distracted by having to do everything, but they can kind of focus on the one thing that whatever that particular community is good at.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is just like actually you got to actually just directly address the problem head on, because I think fundamentally, I believe fundamentally surplus value and like profits inherently comes from basically eating complexity. Yeah. Like if you're just like a simple, like, I mean, you're basically saying I want to make a commodity, so I want to get commoditized, and there's not going to be any value to capture there, which is, I mean, noble and great and awesome. So like thumbs up to the infrastructure layer for building all those awesome commodities, right? That the apps can build on top of. But you want to be able to handle it. I mean, you want to be able to deliver the user what they want, right? Why should somebody else do it? Why not whatever project you're building, right? Why shouldn't that be the one that does it? And the way to really do this and really scale it up and really sort of like capitalize on this, that's by being faster and better. And today what that means is integrating AI into your processes, right? So I think that's going to be like the top apps that succeed in DeFi and crypto, just like the top companies in the whole world. I mean, everyone's dealing with this right now, but they're going to integrate AI into the governance. That's going to be like an essential way to like, how do you maintain the fundamental characteristics of DeFi? How do you maintain that decentralization, yet become able to deliver these very complex like value propositions and abstract all that complexity away, right? I mean, with Sky, it's like it's a stable coin and you can get token rewards. And that doesn't sound so complicated. But under the hood, it's like, incredibly parallelized and optimized and has all this complexity. But like, you don't need to deal with that as a user. You just need to trust that it works and look at the track record.
I think so.
Yeah, simplicity scales. And, I think one of the challenges usually is in DeFi is people create this like very narrow, complex, like, primitives on top of primitives that, you have a niche audience. But I think like first things first is that we have to build things that scale to every single person on the planet, because that's how you get the technology to adopt it. So if if you build for 1 billion, you don't get the same thing as if you want a full like penetration. So I think that's really important. And for us, like obviously it comes with the product development and also how we actually position ourselves as well. And I think the more we get that complexity out, the better. And I think Ethereum's case is that innovation should happen in L2s, but I think kind of like most of the L2s are, they're just copying the same stack and kind of like using the L2 for them, like, not to fight over block space. But there are some interesting innovations, especially on the ZK side. I mean, all the ZK rollups from like ZK Sync, Scroll, Polygon, and Starknet, they all are doing very interesting innovation there. Also, like in terms of Optus, like their goal is to upgrade their network as soon as possible whenever they have innovation. And that's an interesting approach for something where you want high frequency, up-to-date innovation as well. So I think that's something that Ethereum has to kind of like think about down the line, like where is gonna most of that innovation happen, you know, and that hasn't been really settled. So everyone is kind of like building towards their own directions. But yeah, simplicity scales, and the more we make it simple for normies, you know, the more users we will have.
Guys, you've both been super generous with your time. Thanks for coming on and talking to all the listeners about all this stuff. If folks want to find out more about Sky Aave Force or follow the two of you, like what's the best way to do that?
We're both on Lens and obviously on on X.
Let's go. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for Sky, the really important domain is sky.money. That's the new website. That's where you can see everything and use it. Yeah, you can follow me on X, Rune Keck, or Rune on Lens.
Awesome.
I got that.
You got the Rune.
I got that
Wow.
4-letter
Huge.
name there. Yeah.
Massive.
Simplicity.
Simplicity, exactly, Rune. All right, guys, this has been a ton of fun. Thanks for doing this. We'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.